So welcome to the lecture Advanced Natural Language Processing. I'm Edoardo. My colleagues are here, also with Professor Groh. I'll introduce everyone in a bit. But I would rather start from the introductory lecture today. So we're not going to cover any technical content. Today it's rather about why we're here, what to expect from this lecture, and also how it's going to be structured. So first of all, I guess it's easy to imagine why you're here. NLP has been at the center of the attention the last months. We, as a group, we're pretty passionate about what we do, though I promise we've started to plan this lecture before the whole ChatGPT thing. So we had the hype even earlier on. And the final point is, if you have been attending the lecture on natural language processing, you know that there's definitely a lot of fundamentals there that are crucial to understand what happens here, but it doesn't really reach the state of the art, which is then the focus of what we do in this course. We've organized the course in blocks, and each block will roughly take 2 weeks, and usually it's 3 sessions. One block is going to be slightly longer, but it will be 2 to 3 lectures, and then a tutorial at the end of the block. And all the material will be uploaded on Moodle. As you can see, we have 6 blocks, and each block will correspond to one person that I will introduce. And then we have a bonus block at the end, which is going to be guest lectures, and it will not be included in the exam, but we thought it's still interesting to hear. Coming to the tutorials, so as I said, each block has its own tutorial, where we try to apply or get a more practical understanding of what we see in the lecture. And we will make available the exercises at the beginning of the block, so you have time throughout the block to try and solve them. And then at the tutorial session, which is at the end of the block, it will be a sort of a Q&A where we try to go over what you didn't understand, and where we have more time to discuss maybe further points or maybe like deeper things that are relevant to that block. And before anyone asks, there are no bonus points. However, I recommend that you really come to the tutorials because they're very exam relevant. So that practical knowledge and application ability that you gain in the tutorial, I think is very relevant to understand also what's in the exam, but also to apply to all sorts of problems that you will encounter beyond this course. We will have a written exam at the end, which will be either 60 or 90 minutes. We'll communicate that. And yeah, as I mentioned, it will include all the blocks in the course except the bonus one. All right, so regarding the blocks, I'm Edoardo. I'll be doing the first block, so the one that starts on Thursday. And my block is slightly longer, but it's more of an introductory block. We want to build the set of tools to understand also the remaining blocks. So I call it Large Language Models 101. So we will cover of what's the state of the art has been for the last 4 years, mainly, especially focusing on the last 2. So how we went pretty much from what you know as LSTM and BERT to, well, ChatGPT and whatever came out of it. We were trying to understand what's the idea behind each architecture, quite high level, and also what can we learn from it and what's the trend so that we can forecast how the models are going to evolve in the next years. And then maybe the even more important part is not understanding the models themselves, but even how to use them. And so we'll go into few-shot learning. So how can we use these models to do learning in an efficient way when we don't really have a lot of data? And then we will also focus on post-hoc explainability techniques, meaning given a model on which we don't really have any information besides, well, just giving the input and observing the output, how can we observe why it comes to a certain conclusion? Block 2 will be done by Miriam, who's here. And I think the main take of this block, since the first block, as I said, we will cover large language models, but a lot of the examples that I will be making will be sequence to class, because it's a simple setting. Miriam will take this to the next level, and she will go sequence to sequence. And that involves a lot of newer problems, which will be the focus of the second block. Especially, I think, with a focus on machine translation, low resource languages, and sort of that theme. Block 3 will be done by Tobias, who's not in the room today, but will be more focused on the data and training and all the ethical aspect that regards these two things when it comes to deploying NLP models. So you will look at how to evaluate resources, whether the training respects certain constraints that are fundamental to, well, safely and also ethically have a system in place. And I think he also has a pretty strong focus on debugging and what to do when a model doesn't perform the way it should. Then, block number 4, Ahmed. Strong focus on summarization. So I think summarization is quite a prototypical task because it's one of the most common sequence-to-sequence tasks where there's a sort of truth that needs to be maintained because you want to maintain the same content, but of course with a different syntax and length. And so I guess there probably, Ahmed, you will be applying a lot of the LLMs that we will see in the first block and see how they work in that space. Block number 5, Panyan, will be focused on conversational NLP. So in this case, we move from summarization to what happens when there is a context that needs to be kept across many iterations, which is usually how a conversation works. And final block, it goes a bit more exotic in terms of focus. We will have quantum NLP, will be done by Fabienne, who's not in the room today. And we'll focus on the topic of quantum NLP. And I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest expert on this topic, but I'm sure she is. And basically, it comes down to running models on quantum circuits, and this is all done by simulations. And he tries to combine the software that we're trying to build with this new machines that pretty much enable a completely different set of experiments and possibilities in the realm. Okay, that was it for the blocks. As I said, there will be a bonus block with guest lectures that we will communicate soon. And in terms of what to expect. So first of all, what do we expect from you? This is an advanced course. So we will not be explaining what an LSTM does, neither what BERT does. We sort of expect that you know how that works. And if you don't, there's still time to catch up quickly at the beginning, but I don't think we will lose a lot of time going over the basics. So we will take a lot of things for granted. If you have done, let's say, the machine learning, deep learning, NLP courses from TUM, you're probably very much okay. Could also be that you have done some other courses like NLP from Stanford you followed online. That will also do the job. However, just keep in mind that we will be going at a pretty fast pace. And it's not necessary, but if you have worked with PyTorch, TensorFlow, or Hugging Face, even better, anything that gives you some implementational knowledge in terms of deep learning frameworks, that will be very helpful for the tutorials, although that's not the sole focus. Yeah. Now, what should you expect from us? So this is a new course. We haven't done this before, and we're trying to focus on the latest development of what happened in NLP. And as you can imagine, if you have followed a bit what happened in the space, if I did this course 1 year ago, it would have been a completely different course. There would have been barely GPT-3. Now there's ChatGPT, Llama, Alpaca. I could spend an hour just naming what happened from January to now. So as you can guess, the space is moving very fast. What I'm trying to convey here is that very often there are no precise answers to a specific problem or a specific question, just because the answers are so recent that we don't have a literature that is consolidated. It's not like linear algebra where you go, there's a theory, and that's how it is, kind of end of the story. Here, we will also learn as we go how the literature evolves and what's the new solution to a problem that perhaps didn't even exist 2 months ago. So we will have to rely on experience and intuition a lot more than I wish I had to. And it could be that sometimes we're also wrong because there's a paper that came out 3 days ago and completely changes the way we look at a certain problem. Now, of course, this raises the question of, oh, what's the point in learning the stuff now if in a year it's going to be completely different? And I understand that point. And that's also why we've put a focus on learning the fundamentals. So what are the building blocks or the ideas that are behind the models and the approaches that we're going to see, so that you can understand how to apply them in the next iterations. And so I really ask you to look at the facts, but also try to get a deeper understanding of what those facts means in terms of where the next steps, in which direction they're going to be. And I really encourage you to, well, take your own research to class. If you find something that it's relevant or debates or even adds value to what we cover, bring it to the tutorial and we'll be very happy to discuss it. And most of the progress right now, unfortunately, is not done by universities anymore. So you have companies that are able sometimes to move at a faster pace than we are able in academia. So keeping an eye on what those companies do often gives you an edge in understanding also how research is moving. So that's also something that I would suggest you to do as, in parallel to this course, because that will definitely give you a much a more broader understanding and will keep you up to date with what's happening. Finally, inspired by the first NLP course, each lecture will have different levels at which you can, study and learn. And the first is the minimal. This will be enough to, it definitely contains all the stuff that you need for the exam and to, still come out of this course with a solid understanding. However, we are covering what we believed is the top 1% important stuff in our block, but there's so much more that would need to be covered. And therefore, we have a lot more references that are still valuable if you want to learn more. And that's what the standard approach is about. So this is if you want to get a more comprehensive understanding of the subject and on the block that we're going through. And then if you really have the time, we have the last year, which is in-depth. So for those of you who, can read at light speed and really have a lot of time this semester, we have this third year, which involves going into a lot of papers. It's definitely not necessary for the exam or the course, but if that's what you're thriving for, we'll put those as well. And I think this pretty much covers what you should expect, what we're expecting, how the course will be structured, and also, how we're going to spend the semester together. And that was it. So the next lecture will be this Thursday in 3 days. And maybe we can also take questions, or you can talk as well. Thanks.